Hi, this is Aaron Azrod, and welcome to the 69th episode of the Truth Island podcast. Elections can often be a very emotional time for us. The system does an excellent job of teaching us how to wear the same face paint, seeking solace and emotional support within our respective tribe, and intense feelings of excitement, joy, fear, and anger can often shape and persuade our mood depending on which side of democracy we are on. However, is it right for us as citizens or even people to put our happiness and perhaps to some degree faith in the hands of another human being? While the United States is indeed a republic and being active citizens is required to make our democracy work, should political outcomes really have the power to affect our mood? Or maybe our mood is something better decided outside the voting booth. Joining me to help discuss if we should really be putting so much weight on who's in charge, I am once again joined by Claire. Claire, I must say, you and I are political science majors. I'm a political junkie. You're a political junkie. Is it wrong for me to say that I just really wasn't all that emotionally invested in any of this?
I don't think so, Aaron. And I think, these often are sort of defense mechanisms that we develop that serve us quite well. In my own personal experience, I look back at myself as a college student, kind of or in my early 20s, and putting so much of my personal identity in the movements with which I associated with. And I think, it is so easy as we kind of come of age in the world to find things wrong with it. There's tyranny everywhere, there's corruption all over. Life simply isn't fair. And I think that the immediate reaction there is just to kind of throw the baby out with the bathwater and really want to overthrow things, radicalize things, and change things. And that's a really angry position to be in. I remember a moment back when I was living in San Francisco in the kind of the first Black Lives Matter movement. And I remember looking up and there were some snipers on the roof, kind of crowd control, and feeling the inclination toward violence, like feeling like I wanted to physically fight back at that time. And that was a really draining mindset to be in. And I think since then, I've been able to sort of internalize that desire for change and start with things like fixing my own life, rectifying the relationships with the people that are important to me, getting my feet under me so I could support myself and kind of feel proud of the person I was. And only when I was able to do that and feel like a fully fledged, honest, true person of character, could I start to expand that circle a little bit more and help others and commit more to charities and be more of a civic leader. And I think that kind of order is something that we often get wrong. We want to externalize, fix the world, vote for these politicians. And when in reality, that's really the response to maybe some brokenness that's inside us.
Yes, yes. I love what you're saying here about the brokenness within inside of us. And when we think of like people who are looking to politics or looking to political movements for their validation, like what they're looking for is to validate their identity. And they think, oh, I'm a part of this movement. I'm a part of this organization. That's who I am. And they will proudly tote that label. Like, I am a part of this movement. I am a part of this organization. That's who I am. But I'm like, no, 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 no. Identity cannot be constructed from the outside. You cannot seek your identity from something that is outside of yourself. Only you internally have the power to shape your identity. And I think a lot of young people and maybe even older people make this mistake of like kind of joining the next bandwagon and then joining the next big tidal wave and thinking, this is who I am. I'm standing next to these people. And if I'm standing next to these people, I must be a part of them, right?
Yeah, Absolutely. And I mean, we were talking about Nietzsche this week, and this is something that Nietzsche really predicted that, when we lose those kind of meta values that we had in kind of our ancient times in the shape of mythology and religion and more kind of traditional value structures, we need some sort of meaning to replace that. And for some reason, it is not natural for us to find that meaning in ourselves. We need to externalize that to some greater kind of radicalized state. And it just doesn't work. And Nietzsche and kind of all the existentialists would say, hey, let's return to the individual, figure out that value structure for yourself, and kind of go from there.
Yes, yes. This actually reminds me of a conversation I just had with a guy on Nietzsche, and he said that the default behavior is that we are constantly searching for religion in everything. Like now that like a lot of people are losing faith in Christianity and traditional forms of religion, we're now seeking forms of religion in science, in political movements, and it just doesn't quite add up. It's not a perfect transfer of like, okay, now my belief structure is within this political movement or within science fully. The two things don't carry the same thing. And I would argue that religion has the role of constructing our ethics, our moral code, our like it's a way of life, right? Like religion and philosophy are ways of life. They are principles to live on. Political causes are not ways of life for the most part. Most political causes are like, we want to get this, we want to achieve that, we want to produce these outcomes. They're not really actually teaching you how to be a virtuous or stoic person, or they're not endowing you with virtues. They're just endowing you with like, let's get together and get these goods or get these resources or change policies on X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point, and I was just re-listening to an old Freakonomics episode that was talking about kind of why do we even watch the news? Like, why is it even ethically an ethical imperative for us to be informed? Which is something we think of as so natural, right? Like you need to be informed, and they were making kind of an evolutionary biology perspective of it, that from an evolutionary point, it did help us to kind of know what was going on, whether it was around kind of sex or violence or the weather, right? Which is like so ironic that now we have these modern weathermen. Like, yeah, you would do better if you kind of knew what was going on in your tribe and others. But when we bring that to today, there is really very little news that is of practical value to us. We don't have that many threats. And so what this kind of informed or necessity is more akin to like a sports game or entertainment. Sure, you might make the statement that, to be better informed, you might vote better, which leads to better policy. And there's, of course, better turnout. We've seen that, this year more than ever. But when you really take a step back, how much is being informed actually impacting from an ethical point your life or the lives of others? It's kind of a head scratcher.
Yes, yes. And it is like a tight line to walk. And actually, it's funny because I actually think of people who are really involved in politics, and they'll actually tell you this. I really pay attention to local politics. That's what
Mm.
they'll actually tell you. They'll be like, I don't really care what's happening at the federal level or whatever. They're really into local politics because they know that that's going to affect the crossing guard that works at their school. They know that that's going to like influence, the teachers. That's going to influence how the parks are funded. So people who are really, if you really want to be active, pay attention to local politics. That's going to have a direct impact on your life. But I think, like in the podcast that you sent me, they just say, is it really all that useful to know some random fact about what's happening in some foreign country? And okay, now that's going to sound very like people are going to be like, Aaron, you sound super ignorant right now. Like, and then like, and it's true because, the Uyghur Muslims in China, for example, are going through a lot of crazy stuff, and it's good to know that. But, and here's the follow up to this, is that if I know that information, what exactly am I doing with it? And this is like the most important thing to consider, is that if I'm just being well informed and I'm just accruing this information and maybe sharing an article on my Facebook and not really doing all that much with that information, what good is that? Like look at how my time is being allocated here, because I'm accruing this knowledge so that I can come off as an impressive library of information, but I'm not actually doing anything with that knowledge. And I think that in itself might just be a poor allocation of time.
Right. And it's frustrating because, it's human nature that when we see a problem, when we see something wrong, we have to do something to fix it. Right. That kind of blaming others for the world's problems is a complete waste of time. It doesn't serve us. You don't learn anything. You can't grow. You can't mature. You can't make yourself better. But when it comes to, as you're saying, political issues in far off countries, yes, of course, you could mobilize toward one thing and really dedicate your life to it. But outside of that, how are you really going to help solve that? And in that way, Peterson would say, hey, sometimes when things aren't going well, it's not the world that's the cause, it's your framing of it. It's how you come to understand that. Their violence is kind of an inherent element, I think, of human nature. And so I think certainly in putting that and trying to frame it in a way that is beneficial to you and will help you learn is effective. But if you're just inputting this tragedies without being able to do something about it, and certainly with kind of today's charitable structure, giving some money is not this fulfilling way to kind of save the world.
I mean, I might disagree a little bit on that. Like, if you are well informed and that action is donating $10, and I know the nonprofit sector, there's a lot of corruption, and people will tell me, Aaron, you know that most of that money goes to paying some admin that's sitting in an office somewhere. It's not actually going to the kids, in Kenya or whatever. And like that, there is an element of truth there. I think if you're digesting that knowledge and doing some positive action, because I can't, I don't want to live in, like, I kind of disagree with Peterson a little bit here, that it might also be dangerous if we don't pay attention to the outside world at all. Like, if we get into a level where it's like I'm only concerned with my immediate face-to-face interactions, there is kind of like a danger, and dangers could exist in like genocides and in other really, really horrendous things that could crop up in the world if we're not informed. But here's the thing, and again, if you find out that there is some kind of genocide going on in a foreign country, do something with that. Do
Mm-hmm.
something with it. Make it an actionable step. And this actually plays into my theory of what I like to call external crutches, in like using the president, using the rallying cry of the day to not improve yourself. And this is where the danger comes. There are real people out there who are activists and donate money and do good stuff. God bless you. We need people like that. However, there is another type of person, Claire, in this world who uses these things as excuses for not improving themselves. And I think this is kind of what Peterson is pointing to. Maybe he doesn't do the best job of like really splicing these two individuals out, but I would say the person who just says, "Oh man, the world's screwed up. There's no point in doing anything." Or, "Wait a minute, I can't be a good father. I can't be a good son. Look at who's president, or look at the big corporations ruling the world." It's like, no, you're using politics and you're using maybe global corruption as an excuse to avoid your daily responsibility. And those things, we need to kind of parse those things out between the people who are genuine activists and really trying to benefit the world from those who are just using that stuff to escape their present day reality. And I think it's two sets of individuals that this falls under.
I love this concept, and I think I would take it even a step further, that there's a lack of kind of understanding our own potential for that malevolence, or just understanding that there isn't just bad people and good people and we are over on this good side, but that all, the history of the world and everything going on it's complex, and
Mm.
it's rooted in emotion and people's baggage, as well as socioeconomic and environmental climate and everything. And so I think that sort of naive viewpoint on the world of, other things are bad, and I'm just going to kind of rely on that. It just seems like there is a currency of complaining. It's just like, how much can we complain about the world?
Yes, yes. And you have to monitor if you're complaining is kind of distracting you. And I also think that when we think of like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, there is some insight to be gleaned from this a little bit. Let's just say, for example, you're a single mother and you don't have your life in order, and you got a daughter and you're living in poverty and so forth. Right now, your greatest responsibility is taking care of your daughter and making sure that she is loved, that she's getting a proper education, that homework is being done on time. That is your primary goal as a parent. Like once a child pops out, guess what? That is your thing right there. And if you're not in the best situation or in the best position, well, we kind of need to table some of these other causes and put everything in raising the best possible child that we can. So I think it's having a sense of where your priorities are and realizing, hey, I'm a single mom, I'm living in poverty. It's really tragic what's happening outside in this other country right now. It's really tragic, and I feel for these people. However, my life purpose right now is taking care of my daughter, and that's really where my energies are going to be placed right now. What I think happens is that there's a lot of people out here in this world who have children and have really, really imperative responsibilities. And they kind of just use politics or they use external forces to distract from their primary responsibility. They're like, oh, okay, you know what? I would read to you tonight, but mommy's got to go off and save the whales right now. And and I'm like, no, 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 no. And men are also responsible for this as well. Like it's not just a woman. It's not like men
Mm-hmm.
also have to take care of their children as well, and then make sure that they're playing softball with their kids on Sunday and being a good example as well. So I think both men and women have a responsibility to take care of their fundamental responsibilities first before they can move on to the political arena as much.
Absolutely. And often those responsibilities are not the fun ones, because they involve us diving into the depths of our past and our mistakes and our proclivity toward evil and vice, and really unpacking that. And that's the work to be done in life, but it is not attractive, and it's really quite difficult. And I think especially for young people, it's so much easier to externalize that pain, than to really kind of look internally and figure out what's going on. And some days are harder than others, and some days it's going to beat you down and defeat you. But I'm 100% with you that that's the work to be done. And you make an excellent point. I've heard some number, and I won't even try to botch it, but it's like, in order for societies to start, it was about the white rhino. It was like, in order for tribes to start caring about taking care of the white rhino, they need to make a certain amount of money. And I don't know what that number was, but it's like, of course, there's a hierarchy of need here. And it's so easy to project on other people's worldview and say that there's something unethical going on without understanding really what that hierarchy of need might be. But again, this goes back to our original thesis here: is it is an individualistic pursuit, and we have to kind of really understand what's going on in our internal psyche before we can try to tell anyone what to do. And that even goes for giving someone advice. Like, that bubble can expand really quickly.
Yes, yes. All right. You know what, Claire? I'm going to pretend that there's a third person in this Zoom meeting with us, and they're
Okay.
just sitting there scolding their finger, be like, Aaron and Claire, you're so selfish. You're so selfish. Like you're just worried about, improving your own lives and not about the world around you. Well, this is how I'm going to address that third person that's, this imaginative third person sitting in the room. And I'm going to actually use an example that recently happened with my girlfriend, who she's been teaching at home in the house through Zoom. And a
Mm-hmm.
lot of her students, and I'm very proud of her. I don't know how she feels about me sharing the story, but I'm proud of her, so I'm going to share it on the podcast.
Love it.
She was teaching on Zoom, and a lot of the kids were like, they're worried about the election, they're afraid, they're like, I need to go vote and all this other stuff. And my girlfriend was kind of telling them, listen, you go ahead and vote. I voted today. You should vote today. But here's the deal. If you really care about changing the world, you're going to get through community college, you're going to get a bachelor's degree, you're going to work your way up in this world and develop the skills, tools, and the title and the position to actually influence this world. You did your civic responsibility and you voted today. However, at this current juncture, there is nothing that you can possibly do. You voted, and that's really just the end of the story. The best thing that you can do right now is become the best version of yourself, become highly educated, get your master's degree or whatever it is that you need to get the job that actually affords you influence and power. And I was just like walking around in the house and I heard that and I was like, yeah, yeah. And unfortunately, Claire, like a lot of people, kind of coddle this behavior and say, I understand. I understand. You can't do your homework. There's so much going on in the world right now. I'll tell you a story. When I was teaching, Claire, I had this one this one dude during the I was working with this one history teacher, and this was right after the 2016 election. And what he ended up doing is he ended up not teaching for 3 days. And he told his students, like, I'm just so sad. Like, I'm just so sad that I can't teach right now. And I totally understand if you guys don't want to learn for the next 3 days. I'm like, that's pathetic. Like that's the most pathetic thing I've ever seen in my life, where it's like you're too sad to teach and empower your students. You're just going to sit there behind your desk and say, oh my, let's just emotionally, like, and he used a fancy word, like, let's just emotionally process what's going on for a moment, guys, and he's sitting there drinking his like green tea at his desk. And I'm like, no, sir, that's pathetic. And that is the opposite of what we need to be doing. If we really care about this world and we want to make it a better place, we owe it to ourselves to become ultra powerful and start actually getting into spheres where we can make the world in the vision that we envision for it.
I love this. Yeah. And I think, your girlfriend was spot on in that it's not just that there's nothing more we can do, but it's that what we can do is make ourselves stronger so that we can fight a battle in the future. So that, and so that is in a way an active pursuit. And I think, of this professor you're referring to, like there's fight, there's flight, and there's freeze.
Yeah.
And the people that freeze, they get eaten by the jaguar. Like that is not, it's very clearly not the right answer. And, teaching that kind of values it makes us weak. It stops the kinetic energy of movement that causes kind of growth. I'm sure I've mentioned Taleb before with you, but I just am obsessed with Taleb's concept of anti-fragility and this idea that it's not about being resilient. It's not about being surviving, but it's what can we do when when there's resistance on our system to actually make that resistance make us stronger in the future. So weightlifting is the classic example. The more pressure you put on your system, the more the outcomes can be. And so I think if whatever we can do to frame our even powerlessness in the moment to set us up so that when, the jaguar comes out of the woods in the future, we've been there, we've thought about it, we've considered it, because things will come out of the woodwork. Life is going to be tough from politically and personally. And all we can do is kind of set up our system to help try to kind of prepare ourselves for that.
Yes, absolutely. And I've never heard of a leader or anyone who had any kind of credibility say, I can't make a decision right now. I need to emotionally process what's happening. Like that. I'm sorry. Like, I don't care. I know that and you can see I'm getting emotional. Like this is really like, I'm usually super cool, relaxed, Aaron, but this is actually a triggering point for me because it's like we're kind of cherishing a form of inaction and weakness, and we shouldn't be really celebrating these things. Like, I'm sorry, like you just said with the jaguar over there, that's reality. In life, there is jaguars. In reality, there are elections that really don't go your way. There's all sorts of crazy stuff. It's not. It's like you still have to do your responsibility. You still have to take action, and you still need to improve yourself. Now, it's important to be in touch with your emotions, and like if you need to go home and cry, or if you need to go home and just ruminate, or maybe you take that Sunday afternoon off and be like, all right, let me just process what happens. That's okay. But I think that this idea of like forfeiting primal responsibility is not okay. If you have time on a Sunday, and one of the things that I've actually talked to, because people might be thinking right now that I'm like anti-therapy, and I'm like, no, what is actually really important is when you're dealing with your emotions to actually set a time, space, and specific time to do that. Like I actually am not I'm not saying that we should be repressive monks and just hide what we're feeling and hide our emotions. That's a highly dangerous path. But I think that it's like, okay, this is very emotionally distressing right now. I will set time in my week to process this, or I will set time to talk with my therapist about this. That's healthy and that's okay. And I think Peterson, being a psychologist, would approve of what I'm saying right now. What's not okay to be like, I'm not going to work for the next 2 days or something like that. That's when we're going too far.
Absolutely. And I think that rule goes for any traumatic experience you're going through, illness, especially. Like those things will eat up your entire life. And so setting up apart the place to feel those emotions, to talk about it, to game plan, and then leaving some space to just live. I want to lean into what you're saying here about the decision making thing, because I think I found, especially in my career, that so much of leadership is just making a decision. And
Mm-hmm.
so often people bring me an issue and I have very little more information than they do, but I know it is my responsibility to make a call and then defend that call all the way through. And often it doesn't really even matter what the outcome of the call is. It's just that the call was made and that I saw it through. And if it was the wrong call, we're gonna say it was. And I'm just gonna back it up and try to make that happen. And I think that we need to give our leaders a break, because that's all they're doing is they're making calls with the best amount of information possible. And thank God they are, because there's too many of us to make them all together. We need, that's why this government system works. And so I think giving these folks the power to make decisions, and you just start to realize that no one really knows better than anyone else. No, yes, we are experts in certain fields, but we're all just with our limited vision and our limited experiences, trying to make the best call possible. And in the end, I would rather someone that just made a damn call and didn't blame someone else. They took accountability for it.
Yes, and that's the whole thing. Like, and I like what you just said about make the damn call. If it doesn't work out, own up to it, guys. I really apologize. It looks like that's the wrong direction. Let's pivot now in this new direction. Nothing wrong with that. In fact, that's a very honorable
Mm-hmm.
thing to do. And I think that actually shows growth and actually living in the moment. And this also connects to the Buddhist idea. Like I think going back to the example with my girlfriend's students, they're not really living in the moment at all, because
Mm-hmm.
they actually had a math exam that was coming up. Like they had a huge test and they were just they were just so completely lost in the election, so completely lost in whatever. And I'm like, these things that you're getting lost in right now, these like crutches, are actually preventing you from moving forward with your life. And they're preventing you from making executive decision making. Like the real executive decision making you should be making right now is like, okay, it looks like on Thursday I have 3 hours of free time. Let me go ahead and allocate that time to studying for this really important math test, right? And when you get completely lost in external realities and external leaders, you end up on 3 hours of BuzzFeed or CNN, or you end up 3 hours on the YouTube. Like the YouTube algorithm just owns you. Like the YouTube algorithm owns you, and you're, jumping from videos to videos and videos, and you think you're making a difference. But I'm like, no, you're making YouTube really rich by just staying on their algorithm all day long. You're not benefiting anybody. You're not benefiting the world. You're benefiting Google and YouTube by just being on their algorithm, whereas you could have taken that 3 hours and studied for your darn math test.
Of course. And the truth is there's endless YouTube videos to focus on. There are endless concepts and things in the world. Even just me sitting at my desk, there's 50 million things I could be looking at right now. And part of the beauty of the human brain and our eyesight is that we do have selective focus and we get to choose what we aim at and really think about. But be careful with that, because it's the most powerful kind of mechanism in the world. And I think with math especially, it's really easy to be like, how the heck does this relate to something that is about me? Right. And I remember that so much in math, being like, really, why am I learning this? But I think if we can set up an independent value system to see that test as a stepping stone towards something we're aiming at and really focusing on, that's bigger than ourselves, that's where the power is.
And it's funny, I still have that same attitude, like, geez, how's this math helping me? And so and so forth. And
Classic.
I still, right, we're total liberal arts majors here, right? We stay away from that. But even when I was taking math in college, I didn't understand the practical applications at the time. But what I saw it as is as a gatekeeper, right? I'm like,
Right.
this math class is preventing me from pursuing my dreams, right? It's preventing me from like actually doing what I want to do. And instead of just like giving into despair or giving into the fear of external realities, I'm like, let me focus on doing, like, accomplishing and overcoming this one hurdle. And then with every hurdle that I overcome, whether that hurdle speaks to me or speaks to my essence, I'm actually getting really, really, really strong. I'm getting stronger. I'm getting a lot closer to who it is that I want to be. And it's funny that there are times where math that I learned in school has been useful. Sometimes it hasn't. Tell me when proofs, like, if you find a use of proofs, let me know. I'm sure, like, well, hook me up with that. But basically the idea is that I focus on myself, which I don't think is a form of selfishness, because I want to become the best Aaron Azarad that I can become. And then when I'm in a state of empowerment, then and only then am I now able to actually help other people and maybe have influence on the external reality.
Absolutely. And I mean, on your math thing, I think what they always said to us was, just wait, it will be relevant. And damn, they were so right. I think it was just a dragon to slay at the time, but now, oh my gosh, the amount of times that I use it in my work and everything. So shout out to all of our math teachers out there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I absolutely do, agree that all these just serve to make us stronger, and those little wins are transferable, because it's the lobster thing, right? It's just the little shot of serotonin builds us up, and we feel stronger, and that really is transferable to other parts of our life. And I think about that in terms of suffering, that one of my sole purposes here is just to make life a little bit less miserable for those people around me, and to alleviate suffering, and just make someone smile if I can. And those little moments of joy, to me, are what it's all about. And I can do that so much better when I'm stronger, and when I feel good about myself and the skin I'm in.
Yes, absolutely. And I think it's this idea also of like, and I think this is something that John brought up in an episode that I did with him, is that if you haven't really developed your skill set at a high level, you're not going to be able to give back to society. And the classic example is that I think I used in this episode was the father that never learned algebra, right? And now that father has a kid who's in the ninth grade, and they're like, oh man, son, I wish I could help you with that, but your old man here, he was on the football team. I didn't really pay too much attention. Now that father, because that father has not built up their skill set down the line, they're unable to actually sit down with their kid and teach that child algebra. So when we don't cultivate ourselves to our highest form, we have less utility. We have less to offer the world. We have less knowledge to offer the world. And the ultimate application of this is the form of wisdom. If you
Mm.
don't cultivate higher wisdom, you're going to develop a lot of wrinkles. We all develop wrinkles when we get older, Claire, unfortunately. There's nothing we can really do about
No,
it,
I
right?
don't.
You've got like the right facial
No.
cream or something. So everyone in the world is going to develop wrinkles except Claire Bevan,
Yep,
right?
you got it.
But when we get to this old age, if we haven't cultivated wisdom or knowledge, right, we're not going to have all that much to kind of pass on to our children and our grandchildren, or if we decide not to have children, to just younger folk or people in need. And you can only pass on wisdom and actually help somebody. It's not always just a money thing, like, I'm rich now, here you go, here's $500, here, there is that too, and that is a form of help. But I think the ultimate form of help is that you're cultivated and chiseled at a high level, and now only then are you able to actually help people.
And it's also the anecdote for resentment, because as you say, we will all age, and that promise of our youth is a really sad thing to sacrifice. But when we make the trade for wisdom, it's worth it. Or at least it's a little more bearable. And I think with wisdom, also comes an understanding of our value system. And I think, ironing out those kinks that we talked about with Rogers around, I believe this, but I don't know, I kind of think this and I act this way. Those, if they're left unchecked, really become sores that fester. And so I think the more we can kind of iron out those things through our life, that's also something we pass on, because they're implicit, but they're real.
Yes, absolutely. And it's important. And it's important, like, I've come to learn that, one must love themselves before they can love others, and
Mhm.
understand themselves before they can understand others. And a lot of it is a lot of it is grappling with yourself and your internal questions. And like you just said a second ago, it's like, geez, I believe this and yet I do that. If you have contradictions in your life, you're not ready to move on to the next level. You're just not, right? If you've got walking contradictions in your life, those need to be sorted out, and you have to have a firm sense of identity. And a classic example that I think of is, I am sorry to kind of typecast woman here, but you imagine you have a mom with a child, and that mom has a husband, and she acts a certain way with that husband, and then that husband disappears, and then a new husband comes in, and then that mom becomes a whole new different type of person, and then maybe a third husband comes in down the line or whatever. That's an example of a person that doesn't have a firm sense of identity, because whatever new man comes into their life, they sort of take up that mantle and they sort of bend. Now, look, when you're interacting with new people, there is some give and take. But if you don't have a firmness of character, if you're not a statue of character, then you're going to just blow to whichever way the wind is going, for better or worse.
Absolutely. And I think you'll also blow to how people treat you. And there's this awesome meme going around the internet of a girl that posted, and it's like she posts her mom's new husband built this giant mug wall for her to display all of her mugs that she collects. And the girl's point was like, my dad used to hate when my mom would always bring on a new mug. And here she found this guy that is cherishing her for it. And I think it's so easy when we don't know, when we don't really love those things about ourselves, to be blown in the wind by others. And then that becomes a slave mentality almost, that we can't really let others love us also in those same ways. So it's huge, and it's hard, and it takes a lifetime, right? It's not something that we think of instantly, but certainly putting our feet down and not letting us be blown in the wind, and that level of agreeableness is something I'm really working towards, because I don't want to just be nice. I want to be a force to be reckoned with, that
I love it.
chooses
I
to
love
be
it. Bevan,
chooses to
a
be
force to
nice
be reckoned
now.
with. I love it. Yes.
Yeah. And because that is real morality, is standing back and keeping your guns in your holster.
Yes, absolutely. This idea, and to be honest, when I say wind blowing you, like, okay, yes, it's possible that some nice people will come in your life, but it's usually not that way, right? It's usually the winds that are blowing at you are usually not for the most positive thing. They're usually in the more negative, or if not negative, kind of like a side quest and distracting, right? It's like really, really distracting. Like, even an example of, like, when this is something I'll tell you about myself now. So I used to, when I was in my 20s, I really wanted to be social, really wanted to be social. And I was like, weekend would come, I wait by my phone. Oh shoot, I got a text from him. I grab my phone. What? I have to go all the way to Bay Ridge? Not a problem. 2 hour R train ride to Bay Ridge to hang out with God knows who? Not a problem, sir. I'll be there. You can count on me. And here's what actually causes that behavior to happen. Because I did not have a well cultivated sense of myself and what I should be doing with my time, I just allowed whatever experience came my way. I let fate guide me. I was the opposite of a protagonist. I just allowed fate to guide me. And when a text message appeared on my phone, I rushed to answer it immediately. Saturday, 8 o'clock at this party, got it done. And I let the winds of fate just take me. Did anything bad happen at these parties? Not really. No, maybe I got a little tipsy, but nothing too bad. But the idea is that because I had a void in my own life, I wasn't making podcasts, I wasn't writing, I wasn't doing things that would cultivate my higher self. I just allowed myself to be open to whatever opportunities or whatever came my way. And that's not really a way to live life.
Absolutely. And I even think I actively valued that lifestyle, that I thought that there was some serendipitous magic in things just happening, that if I over planned, I would actually cut off that magic from my life. And in reality, you're always aiming at something, whether you're intellectually choosing to or not. So it's not, free will is limited in this way. And so I totally feel you. And I think it's transformative when we kind of take control over ourselves and we teach people how to treat us. I mean, I find that in relationships all the time, is that the first time you put your foot down about something, it's very, very impactful, because you just teach people that you can say no. And that's where the power is.
One of the most empowering things that's happened to me more recently is I've had some friends that have asked to hang out with me, and I've actually told them no. And this is a shift for me in my own life. And when I say no, I don't wish them any harm. I wish them well. God bless them. Love you guys. Have fun. But for me, it's a game changer, because I'm actually saying the things that I'm into, the things that I'm highly interested in, are worthwhile. And in fact, they're so worthwhile that I'm willing to sacrifice being social on the altar. I'm willing to sacrifice being social, being with other people. And this is a societal problem, because society tells us that loners are crazy. Loners are bad people. They're hermits. They're dangerous. Like, do not be a loner. Make sure that you rub against as many people as possible. Make sure that you got yourself standing next to 10 other people and put that on your Instagram so people know that you had a good Friday night, right? Like, that's a thing. Like, people will actually go out on a Friday and then take a selfie or take it with a bunch of friends, put that on their Instagram or Snapchat, whatever the hell the kids use today. And that's a way so that when they go into the office on Monday, being like, see, I have a life. I have a life. I'm busy. I'm busy. Look, people hang out with me. And that's how they validate themselves. They validate themselves by being like, look at all the crazy adventures I had on the weekend. Look at all of these memorable moments I had in Central Park. Look at me on the picnic blanket having this cool picnic thing, right? I mean, first off, it's COVID. No one's having any cool picnics right now. But in the before times, that's how the world functioned. And I'm like, no, that is actually not how you should be living your life.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And yeah, I think that it's easy to say this, right? Because external validation feels really good in the moment. Likes are little dopamine, givers. They're really quite effective at that. But what I've been able to trade that for is your friend that remembers you have something going on that day and texts you, in the moment, or your friend that sends you flowers because you got a new job. I mean, it makes me well up just thinking about it. That is so much more satisfying than the pictures and the likes and all of that. And it really isn't. You can change that by where you put your focus. And if you're looking at someone else's bathroom selfie and saying, I want a bathroom selfie like that, you're gonna get one.
That's a thing now.
And
Bathroom selfies is the new
oh
thing.
yeah, of course. Where you take
Yeah.
in the mirror and you have the toilet behind you, it's very attractive. But if if you intellectually identify a person whom which you like their values and you want to be more like them, tell them, like act it out, be there for them, show them, model the behavior you want. And when they do something you like, tell them it 10 million times. I think that's something that I've now become more able to do, is like honest, true compliments to people. And it just blows people out of the water when you're like, hey man, you were such a good listener, I'm so impressed by that. And people just love it. It's not gross or cheesy or too much. It's really powerful.
Yes, yes. I think that that's important. And positive affirmations is really, really wonderful. And like, you actually know that you have true friends when they're able to step outside themselves. Like, because we all have, like, your fake friends have a lot of insecurity. And when they see you're doing well, they try and bring you down, or they don't bring you down. They kind of ignore you or downplay your account. That's nice, Aaron. That's nice.
Mm-hmm.
That's nice. Hey, yeah, nice. Anyways, I did blah blah blah, right? Like those are not real friends, because they're not giving you. They're too insecure to actually step outside themselves and give you a true positive affirmation.
Mm-hmm.
And it's good to know the truth. It's good to know that reality. Tying this back to our, discussion of leaders and political movements and so forth, I think that's actually what kind of triggers a lot of people to attend like protests and things like that. Because I've walked by many protests, talked to any protester, whether they're on the left or on the right, does not matter, and they're usually highly like ill-informed, right? You talk to the protest, and this happens both on the left and right. They're like, yeah, we're just here, doing blah blah, we're just here to let our voice be known. And then you ask them some follow-up questions and they really can't defend themselves. And now that we're talking about being social, I think what this comes down to is that these people could give less of a crap about the rallying cry of the day. It's just that they want to be social. They're just using the protest as an excuse to have selfies and using it as an excuse to be surrounded by other people. And I get that life can be really lonely. I get that. I get that you want to be surrounded by other people. But here's the rub: is it really worth compromising what you believe in, or not really discovering what you truly believe in just for the sake of being social? And that's where I think we lose so many people.
Yeah. And, you know, it's inevitable that we find meaning in our friends because they validate our identity. And I think that it's such a comforting feeling when you're in a group of people that you love and you just know who you are and
Yeah.
they see you for who you are. And it's a little bit deceptive, but that's just the truth of it. And I think, in today's age, like politics and activism has become sort of like, it's like rock and roll. It's just what you talk about, it's just what you and your friends are doing together. And it's an aspect of that identity, but so interesting when it's not rock and roll at all. It's such a more kind of profound and impactful thought structure.
Yeah, it is. And it feeds into tribalism, which we also get with sports a little bit, and so forth, right? It gives, like, people want that in-group sensation. They want
Yes.
the in-group sensation of, like, my team won and your team lost. And I've debated with other people about this. Is this an inherently good thing? Is it an inherently bad thing? But I think for the purposes of our discussion, before you even think of this of joining a tribe, know thyself. Like, you really need to know
Mm-hmm.
yourself, and have a firm idea of where you stand. And if there's a particular coalition of people, you can temporarily align yourself with them. Like, hey, it looks like my needs and the needs of what you guys are fighting for are aligned, just so on this very critical issue. And that's okay. And that's an extension of your personality. But if you are protesting something new every single week, you're not being real with yourself. Like, there's no way that you care about the whales and veganism, environment, like all, or taxation policy. Like, there's no way that you care about all of these things in one. Like, one individual has these many, like, really deep seated feelings, is just I find that highly doubtful. I think it's like you may have a few things that you really need to show up for and then help, but I think that's just a lack of not knowing yourself.
And the potential that all of those opinions are true or scientifically line up to reality is so low.
Mm,
And that's a very slippery slope. I mean, that's where you get kind of the concept of duty over individual values and ethics. And I think that that's where you get the Nazi guards, and you get, we all have proclivity to get really sucked into the systems that we're in, and it's blinding. It really is. And so, to your point, you better know what you're willing to do and not willing to do before you dive in.
yes, and you actually touched on something very dangerous, and I'm glad that you went there. Um, Most of the causes that we have in the world today are fairly good, benign at best. Like they're not necessarily bad causes. Like there's something inherently wrong with trying to change the environment. But here's the danger of not knowing yourself. When a Nazi-like cause does arise at some future juncture or future point, if you don't know yourself, then you might get sucked into that. And there's actually been, I think Vice News actually did a really good thing on this. They actually interviewed former neo-Nazis, and they said, why the hell did you get sucked into this, man? Like, and you know what all these young guys said? All the young guys were like, I didn't know any better. Like, I didn't know who I was. I didn't know who I was. And these neo-Nazis came and they gave me a sense of brotherhood, and they gave me a sense of belonging. And that's like an example of where if you don't know yourself, you could easily get sucked into something like that. I mean, thankfully, most of our causes are either benign or on the good side of the fence, but it might come down at some point in the next decade where some really nefarious groups start emerging. And if you don't know yourself, you're going to get sucked into their ranks.
And it sounds like way too harsh an example. It really does. It sounds just out there, but it's important and it's real. And this was not that long ago.
Yeah.
And it was socioeconomic conditions that could happen in a country very quickly. And so I think this Peterson gets a lot of flack in this area just for being so kind of intense about people's potential to be a Soviet Russia guard or a Nazi guard. But if you don't know that you could get there, or if you don't really think through what would put you there, what would make it happen, who would you have to be defending to really act in a horrendous way, then you don't know what we as humans are sort of capable of. And so I think that's the work.
Yes, absolutely. And I think it takes a lot of hard work to start formulating yourself. It may even be like I think depending on how you look at it, we see adulthood as 18 or 21, but I think under like Erickson, it goes to 25 or it goes a little bit older. And to some degree that I think that's okay. I think it's okay to experiment a little bit here and there, but at some point when you're experimenting with different ideas and with different people, this should all be in the pursuit of developing who you are. And I think after you have a social encounter, like I've had many, many, many negative social encounters in my life, Claire. But the important step is when you have a negative social encounter, like you went to a party where there was something bad going on, there were drugs there. Like the important thing to say after that social encounter is like, that is not me, that is not who I am. And okay, I rubbed face to face with this negative social encounter. And now I have this in my index of like, that's not who I am. And then keep going out and pursuing new things that do speak to who you are. And this requires careful cultivation and curating. And you're constantly, I hate to say this, but you are throwing people out, you're throwing ideas out, you're throwing things out of your life. And that's okay. You're going to get, your suitcase of ideas is going to get a lot thinner as you get older.
Yeah, and really watching how interactions make you feel.
Yeah.
And for me, often that's very embodied. That I feel antsy, like I need to leave or I need to go somewhere else. I get kind of a knot in my stomach. Feeling your breathing, and mindfulness can really help you to feel these things.
Yeah.
And that's how I've learned even recently. I'm like, why, I really enjoy hanging out with these people. Why do I always kind of want to leave early? And then I'm like, well, duh, like I'm not enjoying it. And I think that, the real danger here with drugs and alcohol is that you don't get to feel those things anymore. And
Yes.
suddenly you're having a really amazing time with almost anyone. And I'm not perfect, and I certainly have leaned in those areas in ways that I regret. But that's the real blinder here, is that you don't get to watch if you're really enjoying the conversation or not,
Yeah.
because you might as well be on the moon.
Yes. Yes. And I think I shared this on a previous podcast, but I'll share it again. So when I used to go out in my 20s, Claire, I would actually fall asleep at bars, and not because I was intoxicated. I would have like one or two beers, but and what I did was I would like just close my eyes like I'm doing now. Obviously people can't see me, but you can see me. And then people would wake me up and be like, whoa, 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 oh, okay. And what I used to do is I used to and I believe this. I actually thought, guys, I'm a teacher. I wake up at 6 a.m. in the morning. I'm tired, and it's already 9:30, and that for the longest time I thought I'm just getting older. Like I can't hang with it anymore. But actually now, Claire, when I'm doing things that I love, I can actually wake up at 5 a.m. in the morning and then go to bed at 11 o'clock because I'm so freaking engaged. Like I'm waking up
Right.
really, really, really early and going to bed late, just doing what I love. And it's amazing. I'm like, I wake up and I'm like, Jesus Christ, I had 5 hours of sleep, and yet here I am ready to go for the next day. And I'm like, when you actually know who you are, you'll never fall asleep like at 9:30 at night. And I now look back at those years, and God bless them. I love my friends from that era. Like
Sure.
they were not bad people, and I love them today. But I realized like there are probably one too many hangouts that I should maybe not have gone to. And me falling asleep at that bar was a
Right.
sign that I was just so intellectually unengaged from the conversation, and so unengaged from what was going on there, that I wasn't basically being myself in that moment. And I was probably being phony. I was probably being fake. I probably was making jokes that I look back on now and say, Aaron, come on, man, you were just trying to get laughs. You were just trying
Right.
to be social. And that's probably why I was falling asleep.
Yeah. And it's weird that you don't see it in the moment. I mean,
Yeah, no.
I didn't either. But the things that you could read books endlessly on, those are the things you should be studying. The dates that you go on that you could talk for 7 hours and it feels like 10 minutes, those are the dates you should be having. And I don't know why we give ourselves a pass for all the other stuff and just pretend like it's the way things are. But again, this goes back to that kind of attention thing, that sometimes you don't get to choose what you pay attention to. It's just in your natural proclivity, but you better listen to it. Because if you don't rectify that with what you're actually acting, you're not going to be happy.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think bottom line here, whether you're at a bar or whether you're at a protest, if you're falling asleep, you best get out of there and start figuring out who you are. Claire, thank you so much for being on the show today.
This was a really fun one. Thank you, Aaron.
This concludes the 69th episode of the Truth Island podcast. I'm Aaron Azrod.